Peace of the Saints. Today's lecture will largely be a story, and I'll use this real life story to clarify which country is more corrupt, capitalist America or communist Vietnam. This is a very interesting juxtaposition I'm proposing. One country very wealthy, one country, or air quotes, one country very poor, one country capitalist, one country communist. And despite what this story will reveal, I do want you all to know that I'm staunchly a capitalist. I don't think that's what's going on in the United States. I think there's a great deal of cheating, and capitalism is not quite fair. I had a recent experience when exiting Vietnam that I want to share with you because I think it'll be instructive as to the true nature of the United States government and its behavior economically, politically, and otherwise. You have your tax dollars stolen from you, and you get very little back in the United States. Unfortunately, the arguments for capitalism are increasingly not looking so good, and that's because America is completely devoid of values, and I'll tell you what I mean. I want to use an airport as an example, if you don't mind. You may be aware that I have global entry, clear, and all of the premium things you can pay for to make your airport experience more efficient and less hectic. I would like to point out to you that this is a bit comedic, and it is in fact a scam, an unethical capitalist scam, because in actual fact an airport theoretically serves public transportation, and the government probably should be able to maintain a reasonable level of efficiency because the government is very well funded. I know because they take a percentage out of every dollar spent. So they have a tremendous amount of money. When you go to the airport in South Korea, there's actually a timer that allows you to track how efficiently you made it through that airport in terms of the immigration services and the visa processing. And I remember one time going through the South Korean experience, from deplaning to exiting, going through immigration, and I saw that it took about 6 minutes as a foreigner. Ironically, as an American with global entry, there have been times I've come back to America. I remember one time I was in Miami, came in from either Spain or Portugal or Morocco, I forget, and the line was so mind-numbingly long that I almost had a mental breakdown. Now, let me give you the juxtaposition between the U.S. experience and the Vietnamese experience and how they express the nature of the two governments and also the decline of America. So, I'm going to be providing an airport case study to demonstrate how in both cases governmental incompetence, whether it's intentional or not, creates governmental corruption. Then we'll measure the scale and impact in both cases. So if you go through an American airport, you just flew in from another country, whether you're an American or not an American, you'll notice very long lines. Even if you have clear or global entry, it may be inefficient and take a long time, which is to say you paid to be able to get through more quickly, and what you paid for, the product or service, is not being delivered upon, even though the only reason you have to pay for clear or global entry is because the American government is inefficient at managing their airports, and therefore they're slow and unpleasant places to be. Now, in the Vietnamese case, I was just exiting in Da Nang, which is not their largest airport, but it has a decent amount of traffic. After I had fetched my ticket, I was just about to walk away from the ticketing counter, and I observed that the line was very, very long. So I asked the person at the counter, I said, do they have a fast track for first class passengers? And she says, oh, I'm sorry, no. Now, mind you, the line was so long, it just wouldn't be reasonable for me to stand in it. Then there was a guy behind her, and he said, just put the money in the passport. And I was like, well, kind of like that. I'm like, he's like, yeah, just put the money in the passport. And then I figured out, oh, okay, put the money in the passport, then go to one of the military guys or the police officers and say, hey, I'd like to go to the front of the line now. And then they'll see to it that I get to the front of the line. And then once I walk through and the guy who stamps your passport, the immigration officer, he will open up your passport and look at your flight ticket and also pull out that money and hand you your passport back with a stamp and let you walk through. So I said, okay, I'll give it a try. So I was walking up to one of these soldierly looking fellows, and I see a number of folks doing the same thing, mostly Chinese folks in their mid-30s, and they were being let through and directed to a very, very short line, whereas everyone else was waiting in a long line. And I was able to eventually get someone's attention. I said, hey, I'll pay to go to the front of the line. And then she unbuckled the dividing rope, and then she says, go there. And then I walk into a line, and eventually I'm at the immigration officer, and I'd already put a good number of bills into my passport, maybe about 150 USD. Now, the funny thing about these bribes is you never quite know how much the bribe should be, but I always rather be more generous than less generous, just simply because I'm thankful. I really appreciate the fact that there's an option. And so I put the cash in there and handed him my passport. He, did his whole stamp thing, handed me my passport back, and I noticed the cash wasn't there, so certainly this is institutionalized. Now, once I went there to pay my bribe, and mind you, I'm not trying to blow up the spot or mess up anything that's going on in Vietnam. I very much so appreciate it. And what I appreciate is the fact that, see, Americans, certain types of Americans, certain demographic of Americans are very dishonest. So what they'll do is they'll call that corruption, yes? They'll call that by many names, corruption. Now, here's the fact. I paid for a product or service, and I received the product or service. And it was one that I was very satisfied with and happy to pay for. Conversely, you might pay for Clear or pay for global entry in the United States. You pay for the product or service, and maybe about 30 to 40% of the time you don't receive it. You don't get through the airport efficiently and quickly. You don't have a predictable, fast experience. So what I'm pointing out to you is that yes, it may be corrupt in as much as it's not a formal, known, published government process in Vietnam. However, it is widespread enough that foreigners know about the process. The airlines will recommend the process, and everyone on the government side will participate in that process. So it's pretty much what you would call institutionalized, and it's very predictable. Though it is perhaps an unethical, illegal practice, it is one that is very common and reliable. So then I asked myself, well, why would anyone call this a bad thing? Why would anyone call this corruption? Well, you'd only do that if you're trying to make a negative comment, probably because you want to look down on their country because they do it differently than your country. It's a cultural difference. In America, they're still making you pay to get the same service. The only difference is that the government's getting their cut. And that's what gives it legitimacy to you who are fools. In the case of Vietnam, I trust that money goes directly into the pockets of the government workers as opposed to the government, which is ironic because people tend to think that the communist governments take all the money. And maybe they do, but it appears that the capitalist governments are very much so the same, high taxes and taking all the money and giving very little back. So now, when I ask you, which is more corrupt, the service is to get through, immigration, TSA faster. America has it, Vietnam has it. That's the service. In America, it only works 60% of the time. In Vietnam, it works 100% of the time. If you pay your bribe, you're getting through faster. But let me let you know the kicker. You actually don't have to pay the bribe. If you say you'll pay the bribe, they'll put you in the very short line. You'll go straight to the front and you hand your passport to the immigration officer. There doesn't have to be any money in there. And if there's not any money in there, they're not going to call you out and send you to a different line. They're going to process your visa and stamp it and let you carry on. They're not going to get mad at you. They're just going to let you carry on. Either because they maybe don't know that you ended up in the line because you said you'd pay. They don't know if you just happen to be moved to that line from another line. They don't know if you're handicapped, if you're a diplomat, or whatever the case is. And so you'll be able to get through just fine without paying anything. But the fact is, if you do pay, whatever you paid for, 100% of the time you actually get it. Whereas in America, you only get it 60% of the time. So that to me is corrupt, that the government has you pay for a government service and the government does not deliver. That's corrupt. In America, because we like to think the way we do things is better and or superior, we're defining corrupt not based on does the taxpayer, the citizen, get what they paid for, but rather is the process sanctioned by the government, which means that the government is getting their cut. And so what we've allowed the government to do is to implant their thinking in our minds, to implant the disposition of wanting the government to get paid or be a part of every transaction, which is to the benefit of the government. So they've implanted that instinct in our minds. It's just like the kind of people you see on the Instagram comments who are so foolish that they would say, oh, billionaires need to pay more taxes. We're paying taxes as low income people. Wherein the intelligent thing is, if you don't like your taxes as a low income person, you shouldn't be rooting to expand the tax system. You should be rooting to end the tax system. But so often we find that people are miseducated and backward. So anyways, in both cases, the American case and the Vietnamese case, you have huge levels of inefficiency in the airport, which you would think America, with its extraordinary technology and advanced economy, wouldn't have that. It does. So you have inefficiency in both cases. Then what you have is an attempt to fix the inefficiency or allow people to bypass it. In the case of the United States, they use the government. Ironic, because they're capitalists, and capitalists talk about private industry. Conversely, in Vietnam, they use private citizens, which would be closer to private industry because this is the entrepreneurial spirit. Government's not involved. Government didn't select the solution. The people did. The firm was created. The individuals have created businesses to fill the need, and they're actually doing a great job, much better than the United States government or even United States private companies. So ironically, you have the capitalist country opting for the government to solve the problem, whereas you have the communist country opting for the private citizen to solve the problem, and they're actually doing a much better job. So this also leads into us asking the fundamental question of how capitalist is America and how meritocratic is America? Now, when we look at the scale of corruption, I'd say that America is far more corrupt in this situation. And the reason that it's far more corrupt is because they have many people paying annual fees for Clear or paying annual fees for Global Entry or any of their other programs that are supposed to fast track you. Whereas in the case of Vietnam, you can opt in or opt out, and it's quite low cost and very manageable, and it always delivers. So I'd say in this case, measuring them apples to apples, I'd rather go with the Vietnamese offer as opposed to the American trap. Come on now. Shout out, this individual writes, would love to get some advice and some help with my business. Would love. This is often a formulation that indicates lack of thinking. very common phraseology in modern American English. People say, I would love, even when they would not love. Love is a very strong word. In fact, you have to stop abusing the English language because there's nothing comparable to it. So you should really say that when you mean it. People who watch me regularly, they do know that if they have a question, they can definitely get it answered. It's really a phenomenal opportunity because you can send in a mere $20 and get your question answered. Or if it's offline, you can go to wisdom.com/Marquette and share your question. So love is strong. I think if you would love to get your question answered, you'd find a way, which would be as simple as sending a super chat or a Venmo. Shout out to Vote writes, Peace of Saints, you're doing great work. I appreciate that. I also acknowledge Black Man Rising writes, did you see Wes Moore do as told for illegals? No, I didn't. I'd be curious as to what that was about, but I don't trust anyone in the political class. Shout out to Brad. He writes, thank you for the work, Mr. Burton. May I also acknowledge Marcos. He writes, Peace of Saints tuition for the upcoming live. Do you know when the next practicum session is? Absolutely. I'm going to be flying to Nigeria on the second day that I'm there. So I'm flying in on the 1st. So this would be on the 2nd in the evening time, probably around 10-ish. I'll have 10-ish Lagos time. I'll have the practicum. So keep an eye out. I'll be posting that soon. I want to get to Nigeria and kind of get settled in and figure out the logistics before putting that on, just in case I don't have proper internet. But that is the plan. For those of you who like to make money, who don't want to be wiped out in the next couple of years by artificial intelligence, you'd probably be wise to get the AI, no coding, no experience needed course to create your own app. You can get that at school.com/Marquette. Click courses. Shout out to Mr. Gardner, writes, Peace of the Saints, tuition came in via PayPal. Appreciate you, may I also acknowledge. And I just saw him on the drip trip. Roderick writes, tuition via PayPal. Appreciate you. Shout out to those who support the work. I also acknowledge. Danny writes, Peace of the Saints, thank you again for having me at the drip trip. I had a phenomenal time with you and the Saints. Looking forward to the next one, Sass or Nothing. Yeah, it was a beautiful time. It's just such a opportunity to slow life down. And we didn't really use phones because we had each other. A lot of guys spit more game than they've ever spent in their entire life. And that's good. That's the experience I love to facilitate. Shout out to Jefferson, comes in by Venmo, writes, Mr. Burton, if you're willing to break down why royalty is essential to every civilization, I would support the topic. I'm particularly interested in how this would benefit FBA's Peace of the Saints. Are you asking me to, you use the word topic, so I don't know if you're suggesting that I do a separate video on it, or if you're just asking me to address it now, please do clarify. But in short, the royalty are the pride of a people, and also royalty because they have moral authority. They're set there by divine right. They're able to organize large groups of labor to create monuments and do things that are meaningful for the society. And so royalty is critically important. The wealth of your monarch represents the wealth of the nation. So very important to history and also to common identity. Shout out to Matthew, just sent in a question via wisdom.com. Appreciate you. He says, my goal, he says, how are you? I'm very well. I'm very well. I could not complain at all, doing all the things I've ever wanted to do in life. He writes, my goal is to build a $100 million software startup. This can definitely be done. He writes, I'm currently living with my parents in Silicon Valley, building my apps, excellent, and funding them by selling my own door-to-door window cleaning service. Okay, excellent. The flexibility gives me time to focus on software. There you go. Am I approaching this the right way, or should I position myself in a different career or environment while building? Well, I don't know about career. If your career is currently, or if your job rather is currently making money and it's allowing you to fund your potential $100 million software startup, I think that's completely fine. So I don't find that you need a different career. And when you say a different environment, no, I don't think that means you need to move out, but you live in the valley. So the question is, are you on the scene? And I would really increase my presence on the scene. And when you're on the scene, it's important to have something to present, right? Something to show in terms of product. So yeah, I think you are approaching that really well. I actually forgot to record the answer to that. So let me actually go ahead and record that for you. So you have a record. Peace of the Saints. I think that's a very good goal, and you're in the right place to achieve it. Living with your parents and saving on money is very smart, and utilizing your current job to fund your entrepreneurial vision is the wisest thing to do. I don't think you need to invest in a different way to make money in the short term. You're thinking long term. That's really important. In terms of positioning yourself, I think it's important to get to those networking events and present your offer or what you currently have in terms of tech, and utilize that to bring in the kind of co-founders and or investors that you're going to need to get this thing to the top. And sometimes that may include marketers as well. Thank you for asking this question. I think you're totally going the right way, and it's all about marketing yourself and your product, which comes more through building friendships as opposed to networking. I just don't like the term. Great, just sent that over to him on Wisdom. And what Wisdom.com allows you to do is reach any influencer or person you want to hear from, expert, and then you can get a guaranteed reply from them. May I acknowledge Eli Brown supporting the work in a strong way. Shout out to Felix, came in supporting, good to see you. And lastly, we have Lionel writes, Peace of the Saints. Could German ingenuity crossed with unlimited Russian resources have had a chance at rivaling China? Is it why perhaps Nord Stream had to go? Well, I don't know that German ingenuity is still a thing. There's many times I remember being in Frankfurt airport and just observing, something getting close to chaos, certainly disorganized experience. The German ingenuity may be a thing of the past. And you put unlimited Russian resources. I think Russian resources are, in fact, limited, and perhaps in the last 2 years more than they've ever been. Would I see them rivaling China? No, not currently. Russia used to rival China when it was in its early stages with communism, and in fact Russia developed China. If you look into the history, the USSR would send not only ideologists but also engineers. He writes, is this perhaps why Nord Stream had to go? I could not say, but there is no doubt that Germany in its past has been remarkable, as has Russia, but today is China's day, and it almost feels as though China is inexorably moving toward the helm of global leadership. I acknowledge Reginald comes in via PayPal, writes, thank you for the drip trip experience. You're very welcome. And we're going to have our annual drip trip. And when the information goes up, I advise you to purchase your ticket early to attend because they always sell out. And I also acknowledge via twitch.tv/Marquette. We had, I think it's Marquette Devon, if someone can drop the Twitch link. In fact, I'll change the banner for you. But Twitch is a great place to watch because we haven't had any issues with Twitch. So we're presuming that they may at least be attempting at some level to be transparent and fair. Not something you often see in this world. Okay, I think we're all caught up there. Fantastic. Anyways, what I want you guys to gather is that we are underneath a system that is fundamentally exploiting us and lying about that. And we don't even have proper recourse even for the small things. If I wanted to improve the functioning of the airports in America, or question why I've paid for global entry, but it's not providing me any greater value, it's like, well, where do you call? What's the complaint hotline? And I think in most cases there aren't any. And so because of that, these are the things that motivate me to say we need holistic change in the American government, which means that when we burn it down, that would have to include the Democratic and Republican Party. It's also important to note that these claims of freedom are all false. There's no freedom of thought, there's no freedom of speech, there's no freedom of fill in the blank. And this has been historically true. Even if you look at the existence of the Communist Party in America, then you had the Red Scare, which was essentially the government folks using their power in ways that infringed upon democracy, freedom, and all the other abstractions that they talk about. So this stuff is all fictional. You don't have freedom at home. How could you ever go bring freedom to another country or to some demographic in another country? It's just utterly ludicrous. Ladies and saints, it's been a pleasure to have this time to fellowship with you all. I thank those of you who have supported this particular live stream and those of you who are members at peaceofthesaints.com. Until next time.